to the cloud. All right. Hello, everyone. Today is September 23rd, 2019. This is the bi-weekly cluster API provider for vSphere meeting. We have a pretty small group today, but we'll just go ahead and start tackling the agenda. So I wanted to just briefly talk about the cluster API face-to-face. I don't want to get into too much detail because I'm sure in the next cluster API upstream meeting, we're going to talk, the folks, well, the CAPI folks are probably going to give a more deeper look into what was discussed and what the next steps are. But I wanted to just highlight the three big things that we agreed to work on for V1 Alpha 3, which is better control plane management, which is only scoped to KubeADM-based machines. There were some stakeholders who wanted pod-based control planes, but we agreed that machine-based control planes will be in scope for V1 Alpha 3. And then the other thing we discussed was cluster upgrades, which is scoped to only like upgrades, not downgrades, and only upgrades from one Kubernetes version at a time. And then we discussed improving the release management for CAPI. Folks had given feedback that the release process for cluster API core was pretty opaque. And so we agreed to kind of, well, at least the CAPI community agreed to make some of the processes there more transparent and have more of the community members involved in the kind of the release management of CAPI. So we should see more of that activity for V1 Alpha 3. Any questions before we move on? That was kind of what we agreed on for during the face-to-face last week in San Francisco. Okay. So one announcement that I had was that I merged the PR to support the vSphere Cloud Controller Manager, or the vSphere external provider for CAPV. So we now have two separate manifest generation types or modes. One for vSphere 6.7U3 and above, which enables the external vSphere cloud provider, and then one for any version less than 6.7U3, which defaults to the entry. So right now, like as of master, we actually have storage disabled if you're on 6.7U3 and above. But I have a PR open, which I'm going to discuss later, that adds the CSI driver support, which should add storage support back in. But this is kind of, I think it's not ideal that we have like the manifests kind of split between vSphere versions. Andrew and I had some discussions around like maybe having a check in the controller that can check the vSphere version and then, set the KubeADM config differently based on that. But I think it's a little bit more involved in that because of the way the KubeADM config, because of where the KubeADM config type is allowed to be updated. And so we decided that we're just going to keep it simple. We're just going to have two separate manifest generation for those two different modes. And then maybe in a future CAPI version, we can figure out a way to make this experience a bit cleaner. But essentially, the only thing you have to do is there's a -u flag you have to set in the manifest generation tool that either sets it for post 6.7U3 or pre 6.7U3. Any questions on this?
I have one question, Andrew, which is why -u? What is the U for? Unsupported? Old? What does the U mean?
No, it's just because it's 6.7U3, so we just chose -u.
Okay, for update. Okay.
Yeah. Right, Andrew? That's what we agreed on, right? I just remember like we didn't want to have the flag actually say 6.7U3, so we just,
Yes, I have a sore throat. That's why Andrew is leading today. It's because we're using GitOps and not GitOpt. And GitOps, you can only have short flags. So you can only have a single character. And so I just said like under 6.7U3. Yeah, and that was it.
Yep.
Andrew, I did have a question since I'm already breaking my thing not to talk.
Sorry.
I was wondering why did we not discuss making this just part of add-ons? Like the separate add-ons file? And not put this back on the user? Since you no longer require the
yeah, we can't just rely on add-ons file because the core components need to be updated as well. So the Kubanium config for the control plane and the kubelet whatever still needs different values for the cloud provider flag.
Okay.
That makes sense. Okay, so I wanted to talk about Moshe's proposal for like a load balancer framework or pluggable load balancer framework that we can use to have a better HA story for Cat V. But given Moshe isn't here and Yassine isn't here, Yassine was working on the ELB support VMC. I think we're just gonna have to skip this. But Moshe and I did have a chance to connect at the Cat V face-to-face last week. And we agree that the API types in the proposal are not, like we need to iterate on the API types a little bit, but they're not that far off from what I think is a reasonable, like a reasonable alpha API to use, at least prototype support on ELB or F5 or whatever other load balancer solution we might want to integrate with Cat V. So I think a reasonable timeline is like an alpha or an alpha 2 solution by the end of Cat V's view on alpha 3. I think that's a reasonable timeline. But when Moshe is on the call, we can connect with Moshe and try to align on when is a reasonable timeline. But please take a look at Moshe's proposal for load balancers in Cat V. Travis, use of image promoter to Kate's production artifacts repo.
Yeah, I added this to the agenda. I feel like this has come up in a couple times in various different avenues, but we know that CAPI and Kappa is using a tool called the image promoter, where they get a staging directory where they put their builds, and when they're done, they promote that container image up into a production artifacts repo within Kubernetes. And the question has come up from a few different places. Why isn't Cap V doing that? And so I actually ended up talking to DIMS just under 2 weeks ago. It was right after this meeting 2 weeks ago to kind of go over our process. And one thing I'd just like to say when it comes to transparency of releases, I feel like Cap V couldn't be more transparent. It's all in there in proud job configs and within our code. But yeah, the outcome of that discussion with DIMS was that he thought we should do it, but he still said it is the project's choice. And so the way he phrased it was, well, you guys should talk about it and see if you want to do it. The good news that I'll say is that we have a release process right now that's all completely based on prow automation and reacting to Git tags and then pushing to a gcr.io repository that VMware controls. And so these production artifacts repositories that are under the Kate's namespace are not under VMware control, but they are under CNCF. I think they're CNCF yet. They might be just Google, I'm not sure, but they're a community-owned repo. The way DIMS explained it is that we could actually completely keep all of our current release automation and use what we have right now basically as the staging equivalent. And once we're happy and we're done and there's an image in our VMware repo, even though it's in GCR, we could go through that same process and configure that repo as the place where images get promoted from. And so we could still take release images that we're happy with and file off the PR once all the automation's in place, and it'll show up in the same place as all the other providers. So that, to me, is kind of the best of both worlds, because we don't have to throw away or take a step back from all the automation we already have in place, because there's some useful things that we can do that their tool does not yet. And so we can keep all that. But yeah, the starting point is basically, do we want our releases to show up in that Kate's production artifacts repo at all? Because if the answer is no, then we don't have to do anything. But if the answer is yes, how do we get there?
So I have a clarifying question. I think I might have missed a few stuff while I was trying to take notes. So the image promoter process means that we can have the exact same GCR repo and account and setup, but still have the signal from the CNCF? Like it would show up on some.
It would not be the same. This would be a new location that our production images would live. I apologize.
Sorry,
that I can't.
what I meant was for the staging part though. Is that still?
Yeah, that would stay the same. Well, for the staging part, I mean, we wouldn't basically take part in the image promoter staging process at all. We would keep what we have. And then when we're ready to put a release out there that's in the quote unquote community expected destination, we'd fire off a PR and say, hey, copy this GA, this specific tagged container from our repo and promote it up into the community one. And the reason that people like that and why they're looking for that kind of process is kind of about provenance, knowing how those releases ended up in the community repo, who filed the PR to promote it specifically, so we could point to an individual like how it got there and who approved it is the main extra step of the process, I guess. Did that answer your question?
Yes. So so at what point did we stop pushing images to the current GCR repo if we did that?
I don't think we would, unless we want to redo our release process entirely. And that's kind of what I'm saying about the best of both worlds. Right now, part of go ahead,
Charles,
Andrew.
Yeah, I want pre-releases. What I really did not like about Cappy's release was they released 2.0 and 2.0 was ready, but there was no pre-release for that. And I feel like we've done a very good job of having, betas and alphas and all that stuff. And I feel it makes it very useful. And by the time we push a release image, we have confidence in it. So I don't want to move away from being able to do that. So I like keeping the same process and just also publishing the release artifact to wherever. But ideally, that same process would be, I'm more concerned about how do we get the process we have working upstream so everyone can do the same thing. It doesn't have to be exactly the way we implemented it, Travis, but how can we work with DIMS to get to where we can do what KK already does with their betas and their alphas, betas, and RCs. We need that for Cappy. So I don't want to lose it for Cap V, but I do think we should probably have the release artifacts where they have theirs.
Yeah, and just to follow up on that, I think that last thing you said, putting our release artifacts in the same place that they have, we can do that today without changing any of our current process. We'd be the first ones that used what I'm calling our own staging repo instead of one that they provide. But DIM said that was an intended and supposed to be supported configuration. And if it didn't work, that they would work to fix it because they want that to work.
Okay, so I'm trying to connect what Andrew said and what you said. Andrew had mentioned that he liked how CapV does a lot of pre-releases.
So right now, right now, if either one of you, either of the Andrews, but whenever you're ready to cut a beta, an alpha, an RC, there's a specific pattern of tag that we're looking for, and it will build the image and push it into our release directory in our repo. And so you can see releases that are tagged, but they'll specifically say that they're alpha, beta release candidate. There's nothing in the image promoter process that distinguishes having anything come after a semantic version of x.y.z. You can't put a -rc on it or a -beta. And so that's something that we use already and feels like it would be a step backwards in usability to get rid of that.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, and then so this would be, once we have something, we tag 0.5.3, it's tested, it's great, or in this 0.6.0 GA, there would be an additional step of a PR that we file that goes to the image promoter place, and I can't tell you off the top of the head where it goes, but it would say I approve this release, and a couple other approvers would approve the PR, and it would copy it from our repo into the production artifacts repo.
Okay. Would you be okay to open a GitHub issue on the cat v repo, just kind of outlining what we talked about, and then we can follow up there. Just because I want to spend some time like digging into the image promoter process a bit more before I give a thumbs up.
Okay. Yeah, I can write that up, and I'll provide links and sample URLs of where this would live. And yeah, this is since I kind of did a good bit of the release process to date, or at least the current version of it. This is something I'm happy to take lead on as well.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yep, that's it.
Okay. So if there's nothing else, I'm going to go straight into PR triage and issue triage. Anyone else have anything they want to bring up before we do that? Okay. Okay, let's just, so from, these are the only 3 PRs that are open since the last meeting, so we'll go through them. So this is the PR I was talking about earlier, adding CSI support for vSphere 6.7U3 and above. This is a work in progress. Andrew and I are having some discussions around how we want to apply all the CSI add-ons to a target cluster. There were some discussions around copying all the YAML for the CSI driver in a Go file, and then marshalling it or unmarshalling it, and then using the unstructured client to apply it. Or there was the other way would be just codifying all the YAMLs into Go types and then applying them through client Go, whatever. So we're leaning towards using Go types for now, but then at least having the CSI driver itself host those Go types so that we don't drift away from what would be, we don't drift away from what is the recommended YAML to what we have in cat v. So this is going to require us reaching out to CSI driver maintainers and asking if they think that's a reasonable thing. And it's a good thing that you're here, Travis, because I think one thing that would be really cool is if we can have all the YAML for the CSI driver in Go types, and then we can just have a script or something that can marshal all of that into one single YAML file and then just dumps it into a manifest directory or something, so that you just update the Go types for all the manifests per version, and then we can kind of use that in cat v, and then we can, and then if you're just deploying it on a vanilla cluster, you can just apply the manifest file, but at least there's like one place where you update it, and then there's some automation to generate. Yeah, so like, I don't know, like I'm still thinking through this, but yeah, I'm gonna have to reach out to the CSI driver folks and see what the best step here is.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, I mean, you mentioned me, but as I think you're aware, I'm not doing much to shepherd that project at all anymore. Once the current version comes in, I'll kind of consider that transition. However, I do want to stay involved and make sure that the integrations make sense between CPI and CSI, and you're bringing up a really great example of where some commonality could be there. So I'm happy to do what I can there as well. I don't want to just completely walk away from this.
Okay, and there's a good chance that we might just duplicate, like we might just add the Go types in cat b for now, and then revisit this in the near future. So we're not blocked on it. But yeah, that's kind of the current state of things.
Okay, yeah, and I think as far as the current maintainers, or the current contributors for the CSI project coming in, I think all the new core code is there, but then the stream of PRs has kind of stopped. And I wasn't expecting that. I was expecting new ones for documentation updates and new ones for publishing and all that kind of stuff, and I haven't heard anything about it in over a week. So.
Okay. Yeah. So to kind of show you a sense of how much it is, like it's quite a bit. Like there's a lot of code in here that's essentially just transferring like the CSI driver YAML files to Go. So yeah, like it's a lot to maintain, and yeah, like drift is a real problem. So yeah, we're gonna have to come up with something that avoids us like either making a mistake here or just drifting, like accidentally updating provider image without updating the manifest according to the version that we're using. So we'll have to figure something out here.
One question for you there. Does whatever the ideal outcome is there for CSI also apply to CPI? I remember when the cloud controller was coming in, I think the only comment I had on your PR was a bit of drift, where something, and so, okay.
Yeah, exact same problem. And I'm probably gonna have to talk to maybe offline, like you and David, on like exact same thing for CSI. Like maybe we should have a manifest package like Andrew had mentioned before, where like we just provide either types or methods that return like the recommended Go types of the manifest that we recommend through a Go package, so we can import it from capd and use it. But yeah, same problem, and we're gonna have to figure out a good story for this. Okay, next PR. Travis, this one's yours. Remove hack, verify, install.
I didn't even know this was coming up today. This did get merged into Kappa. I was shocked. Yeah, I think this was just vestigial. And when I opened this against Kappa, where this was copied from, they're like, "Oh yeah, good point," and then they merged it. So there's no reason that this project or any other project using Go modules needs to be cloned within the Go path, and that's all that this was enforcing.
I meant to LGTM this already, so I thought I did. Sorry.
All right, let's just do that right now.
Oh, that's, yeah, Yassine did and I didn't. That's what happened, but he's not an approver. Oh wait, yeah, no, he did LGTM it. He just couldn't approve it. So yeah, that's what it was.
Yeah, it looks pretty good to me. Yeah,
it's fine.
Cool. Okay, and then yeah, this is Yassine's PR that's still left. But yeah, we already talked about that. And yeah, I don't think there's any other PRs that, I mean,
Travis, that one is one I've bugged you about for like 3 months now. So I'd really like it if we could get this working. But so it's no longer the same, because it's a little different in V1A2. But it was, you just had a missing flag. I figured it out what it was. So if you, I think in the comments I even tell you how to do it. If you could just do it, great.
Yeah. Total apologies there. The reason that I haven't come to it is I feel like I first need to take Andrew Kim up on his offer to clone his environment on VMC and run things manually, so I can actually test it. And I have not done that.
Actually, let me touch base with you when like tomorrow when I have a voice. I did something recently for everybody using the VMC environment. We have an open VPN server, and I can just give you credentials, and then you can do whatever you want from your desktop, and you can access the hosts.
Okay. Talk tomorrow, man. Sounds good.
Yeah, and related to this, I had a chance to sync up with Jason on the better AWE story for all the Kappa or all the CapB providers, and so I will have an update for that hopefully the next meeting. But just an FYI. All right. Okay, so let's just go through a bunch of issues. I only opened up the ones that we didn't go through since the last meeting. So we can just go straight in. Just assign some host resource in nvar.txt when creating cluster VM through cluster API.
No, this is just somebody not understanding the process correctly. I'll update this when I get a chance.
Okay, so as someone who doesn't know,
yeah.
Well, in general, like as someone who's still learning like the vSphere API, whatever, like when you create a VM, can you specify like I want it scheduled on this host?
Oh no, I misread this.
So I think what
I understand what they want now. I thought they wanted us to update nvar stuff. Yeah, you can do that. You can tell it where to start.
Okay. So if it sounds like we should support it in the API, but we shouldn't necessarily like have it in the nvars.txt generation
No,
part?
no. They just. I don't think they wrote it very well. What all they mean is that the host that is listed in vars, which we use for our cloud provider, they want us to add the ability to specify a host there. But I guess it shouldn't even be an invars. It should just be part of the machine spec.
Yeah.
Except they just made the connection that since all the other variables live in invars, the host should too. But it can't, because ultimately through generation, it would just be the same host for every machine. So we'll just, yeah, this is a good issue. Thank you.
Yeah,
I'll come back and rewrite the thing and then add something to the machine spec.
Okay, sounds good. Kube config secret not being deleted on cluster delete. So I ran into this problem earlier today. Just turns out that that it's a CAPI bug in v2.1, which got fixed in v2.2. So I'm going to open a PR today to update CAPI's version to version 2.2 after I do some testing. So that should fix that. Cluster creation fails due to API not being accessible remotely.
Is this, they're trying to create it behind a firewall or something? I mean, it's in our documentation. You have to have access to the vSphere, to the VMs from wherever you run cluster cuddle.
Yeah. Okay, I'll follow up on this one after the meeting.
I think that's it.
CentOS, sorry. Yep.
Okay, this one is a known issue, and I think Hui followed up on it. Did he link the issue? Hold on. No, don't assign it to him. 1 second. Let me give you the issue number, and you can just link it to him. It is under Image Builder. It's issue. Why can't I find it? It's issue 40. I'm pasting it in chat now.
Okay.
There, yeah, just link that. It's a known issue. It's not accepting any IP.
Guest info.user data after node is successfully bootstrapped.
We need to have a bigger discussion on this, but I had a conversation with him on Slack. It's a valid question. It's a valid ask. Basically, you know, if you do a go vc vm.info and do -e for extra info, after the VM's brought up, why should the guest info still be there? I told him it's better than it used to be. It used to have the vSphere credentials. He said, that's good. You move that, but it still has the private keys for the CA certs, or the certs rather. So it's likely we can remove this after the machine is online, but I don't know what that means on like a post boot, like a reboot. Like if we need some of that info there, I have to double check. Okay, you can assign it to me.
At the 0.4.2 beta 0 has issues to create version 116.0 cluster. Is this just the add-on stuff that?
Hold on, you didn't bring this up earlier, Andrew, so why don't we talk about this now? You mentioned the 116. We could say that the 0.4.2 is 115 and below, because you mentioned talking about 113 in today's call.
Ah, yeah, I forgot to bring that up. Okay, so there's two things that Andrew just brought up. The first thing is once we support the vSphere CSI driver, we have to drop support for Kubernetes 113 because the CSI driver is only supported for Kubernetes 114 and above. If we get the CSI driver PR merged today, or not today, but within this release, then v0.5.2 is going to drop support for 113. And then this issue that he brought up looks like 4.2 doesn't support Kubernetes 116. So do we backport support for 116, or do we just drop it, or only support up to 115 for 4.2?
We've already fixed this on master, right?
So if you're talking about the Calico fix, I think this is different than the Calico fix.
No, I thought this was something to do with some annotation or label. Maybe I'm wrong here.
Yeah, I'm not aware of. I need to dig into
Remove
this
the
one.
ability to prefix. Yeah, it's a label. That's the error, right? Anyway.
Okay, let me follow up on this one. I can follow up.
Yeah.
I don't think we need to talk about it here.
That's fine. But as soon as you decide this, I'm cutting that release. So let's make this the last thing. If we either, because that thing's been in beta forever. So if we fix this, we cut it. If we decide not to fix it, we cut 042.
Okay, sounds good. So I'll look into this. I'll look into this today.
Thank you.
Okay, hostname is changed to be IPv6 localhost after rebooting cluster virtual machine. After create a workload cluster, make some change on VM, then reboot VM. Hostname is changed to be IPv6 localhost. Oh.
Yeah, he said that preserve host name needs to be true, but the thing is that I wonder if this is an issue with their network config. Oh, yeah, there's no telling what's going on here.
Okay,
I don't think. Oh, you know what? 041 doesn't have Yuvaraj's hostname fix. Because in part of 042 was Yuvaraj's hostname fix, and he forward ported it to master. But we never released 042. So.
Okay, can I send this to you to follow up, and then?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, current v152 field. Okay, so I actually ran into this today as well. And the problem is that you can't pivot a secret if it has an owner ref. So you have to delete the owner ref on the pivot. And there is I have a branch locally to fix this in Cappy, but it's actually not our issue. It's Cappy's issue.
I was gonna ask if it was Cappy's issue. Yeah.
But yeah, I can follow up once I have the PR.
But that's interesting because they use the owner refs to determine the graph of the objects to move, which means they now have to determine that they have to have the owner ref so they can move the secret or know to move it, but then delete the owner ref before they do the move.
Yeah, so what's actually happening is that there was a PR like a few days ago to re-add the owner ref. It's not this one. Where is it? Maybe it is this. Okay, yeah. So before we would just delete the owner ref entirely before we do the pivot, which allows the pivot to happen, but then we don't reapply the owner ref. Meaning, if you delete the cluster, then you don't delete the secret. So this PR keeps the owner ref, but then it resets the UID. But there's actually a validation on the API server that if you try to add an owner ref without a UID, it fails. And so that's the problem. So we need to copy the owner ref locally, create a secret without the owner ref, and then reapply the owner ref based on the new target cluster's UID. So yeah, I already ran into this morning, so I'm going to fix this. So yeah, I'll send it to me. Okay, last one. The CentOS OVA has issues to bring up. Oh, this is the same one. Oh, sorry. Oh yeah, this is the thing that this is not in our repo. So delete that. All right, so I think that's it for issue triage. Yeah. Anything else that folks want to talk about? Okay. Otherwise, we'll end 20 minutes early. All right. See everyone in 2 weeks then.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. See ya.